Epicurea Poetica, Episode 1, Tennyson's Lucretius, Part 1. So we begin in the first episode of this series with a very important and distinguished poet. This is Alfred Lord Tennyson. His dates are 1809 to 1892. He served as Poet Laureate of the United Kingdom for the last 42 years of his life, and during that time was a contemporary and acquaintance of many important and notable individuals, including Queen Victoria, Charles Dickens, and Charles Darwin. Now, Darwin would go on to play an important and influential role in the moral and intellectual lives of the Victorian and later poets, as we'll have occasion to see. But today we're going to be looking at a poem that was influenced by a much older materialist poet. We're looking at Tennyson's poem, influenced by Lucretius. Lucilla, wedded to Lucretius, found her master cold, for when the morning flush of passion and the first embrace had died between them, though he loved her none the less, yet often when the woman heard his foot return from pacings in the field, and ran to greet him with a kiss, the master took small notice, or austerely, for his mind, half buried in some weightier argument, or fancy borne perhaps upon the rise and long roll of the hexameter, he passed to turn and ponder those 300 scrolls left by the teacher, whom he held divine. So we begin with a very simple bit of exposition. This part here is rather prosaic, so we're just going to move quickly through it. I don't believe that there is any ancient source indicating that Lucilla is the name of Lucretius's wife. I don't believe that we really know anything at all concrete about Lucretius's life. But this is the tradition that develops in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and it's one that we'll see moving forward. She brooked it not, but wrathful, petulant, dreaming some rival, sought and found a witch, who brewed the philtre which had power, they said, to lead an errant passion home again. And this at times she mingled with his drink, and this destroyed him. For the wicked broth confused the chemic labor of the blood, and tickling the brute brain within the man's, made havoc among those tender cells, and checked his power to shape. He loathed himself, and once after a tempest woke upon a morn that mocked him with returning calm, and cried. Okay, so this is the immediate prelude to what will turn out to be the rest of the poem, which is Lucretius's extensive monologue. But first I want to talk about the story of the love filter, the filter that goes on to, as it says here, destroy him. This is going to drive him mad. This story is probably, almost certainly, really not true. It is not an invention of Tennyson. It actually comes from one of the church fathers. This is St. Jerome. Titus Lucretius, says Jerome, poet, is born. After a love philtre had turned him mad, and he had written in the intervals of his insanity several books which Cicero revised, he killed himself by his own hand in the 44th year of his age. This is a painting by Italian painter Guido Reni, and it's very typical of the many, many portrait paintings of St. Jerome that survive. There are a couple of icons here that stick with him in almost all of his portrayals. You have, obviously, the crucifix. His hand here is resting on a skull, a token or a remembrance of death and the transience of life and the fleetingness of time. Something odd in his right hand. This is actually a rock. St. Jerome was a great lover of classical literature. He required discipline to keep himself away from these dangerous texts like Cicero, texts that we wouldn't think of as being terribly dangerous today. But for someone who calls himself a Christian, it's important, or at least was important to Jerome, that he spend his time with the only real text that really matters, and that is, of course, the Christian Bible. So this stone that he's holding in his hand is actually a tool of discipline. He recorded that he would beat his chest when he was faced with temptation as a form of corporal mortification. So this story of the love philter and the insanity and the madness, it comes from an account passed along by St. Jerome. There are very good reasons to think that it's not true. Cicero doesn't mention it. Virgil doesn't mention it. None of these ancient sources who would have known the story mention it. But it does form the foundation of what will be a very expressive poem by Tennyson, and a very serious challenge to the Epicurean system of thought. And that's really why I wanted to talk about this poem today. And so now we have Lucretius speaking. Storm in the night, for thrice I heard the rain rushing, and once the flash of a thunderbolt. Methought I never saw so fierce a fork. Struck out the streaming mountainside, and showed a riotous confluence of watercourses, blanching and billowing in a hollow of it, where all but yestereve was dusty dry. Storm, and what dreams, ye holy gods, what dreams! For thrice I wakened after dreams. Perchance we do but recollect the dreams that come just ere the waking. Terrible! For it seemed a void was made in nature, all her bonds cracked, and I saw the flaring atom streams and torrents of her myriad universe, ruining along the illimitable inane, fly on to clash together again, and make another and another frame of things forever. Okay, so Lucretius is already slipping into his madness here. And in his dream, what he confronts is really a near mystical vision of nothing more than the kind of universe that Epicurus laid out. It's a universe made of atoms and void, a universe where lightning is not the direct will of the gods, but is a random, chaotic and natural occurrence. It happens because of natural causes. And so this idea of a material universe that's really the foundation of Epicurean philosophy, in this poem, because of the love philter that's driving him mad, turns out to be almost too much. Lucretius seems to get a direct experience of this universe, and it's almost too horrible for him to even contemplate. He sees a volcano being split asunder, and water flowing beneath the earth. He sees lightning. He's hearing thunder. There's torrents of rain, and then he goes on to say, "A void was made in nature, all her bonds cracked." This is a very interesting line because, of course, from Epicurus's point of view, the argument that he made was that nature was made of atoms and void and nothing else. So this void that was made in nature seems to be almost a vacuum within a vacuum, cutting the universe. And Lucretius is staring into it, and he's seeing visions that are absolutely terrifying him. The flaring atom streams, the torrents of the universe, ruining along the illimitable inane. This line is interesting as well. Ruining means to fall headlong. So the atoms are chaotically moving. They're moving very fast. They're crashing into each other along the illimitable inane. So a few lines before, we see the word void is used. Now we use the word inane. Really, they mean the same thing. So whether there are subtle shades of difference here will be a question worth exploring. So keep that in mind. Fly on to clash together again and make another and another frame of things forever. So what he's really seeing here is almost time accelerated. He's seeing the accretion of a planet, which happens over eons. He's seeing, at least in his imagination, instantly. Things are just coming together and then falling apart, and coming together and falling apart. Crashing chaotically, mindlessly, meaninglessly into each other forever and ever. And this vision, which was once a source of comfort as the foundation of Epicurean philosophy, is now an absolute source of terror. I'll invite you to join me next time, and we will continue along with Tennyson's Lucretius in part 2.